They timed it like a birthday present. Paper plates still sticky with chocolate frosting sat stacked on the counter next to the sagging balloon bouquet, and the candles I'd blown out 2 hours ago lay drowned in a puddle of wax shaped like a ruined wish. My father had his arms folded the way he did when he was about to fire someone at the shop, jaw ticking, eyes narrowed as if the kitchen light itself had offended him. My mother stood half behind him, fingers worrying the gold cross at her throat into a squeak. "You're 18, my father said. We've done our duty. We fed you. We housed you. You're grown." The refrigerator hummed hard enough to shake a magnet free. It clinked off the tile. Outside, rain started up, soft and insistent, the kind that makes the street smell like pennies and damp bark. My backpack sat by the back door like a loyal dog, already packed socks, notebooks, the battered copy of Octavia Butler I kept hidden behind the cereal. I'd prepared for this conversation a dozen times in my head, but in none of those rehearsals had the frosting still on my lip. "You're kicking me out." I said it softly to hear how it sounded. Like a door closing. Like a small animal pushed into tall grass. My mother flinched. "Don't be dramatic. Your father. Don't make me the heavy," he snapped, never taking his eyes off me. "You think we had it easy? You think we got help? Be grateful we fed you. Be grateful we didn't. Forget my birthday?" I wiped the frosting away with my wrist. "You remembered." He looked at the plates as if seeing them for the first time, then grimaced, like the fact of the cake accused him. "You'll land on your feet if you stop sulking. You've got that part-time. Take more shifts. People pay rent. That's life." I listened to the rain. I listened to the sound of the old house settling around us, wood popping, pipes ticking like cooling bones. The words I had been carrying, hard, sharp, impossible, pressed against my teeth. I could spit them out and everything would change. I had promised myself I'd wait. That I'd do this clean, with a lawyer at my side, a table, documents. But their faces, my father's satisfied finality, my mother's wet-eyed relief that the decision had been made, lit a fuse I hadn't known was there. "Okay," I said, and reached for my backpack. The zipper bit my skin and stung. I looked up, met my father's eyes, and said very clearly, each word like a coin laid flat on a table, "The house isn't yours. It's mine." Silence flipped the kitchen on its back. The hum of the fridge, the rain, the pipe ticks had gone. Only the rough static of my father's breath remained, the kind of breath people take after they've been shoved. My mother's fingers stilled on the cross. The light over the sink flickered as if it, too, doubted my sentence. "What did you say?" My father took a step forward. He smelled like machine oil and wintergreen gum, the sense of every argument we'd ever had. "I said the house isn't yours." I kept my voice even, because that's what Grandma taught me, that rich people win by staying calm. I am not rich, not in any space where money does what you tell it to, but I had one thing, one coiled spring. It hasn't been for a year and a half. Nana changed the deed. She put it in a trust for me. Effective today. My mother's mouth opened and closed. She looked toward the hallway, toward the portrait of Nana in her blue church hat, chin lifted as if smelling something better than us. "No," she said, but the word came out small, like a child's refusal. "Your grandmother wouldn't." "She did." I reached into the backpack, slid the folder free. The paper rasped against the nylon. I set it on the table where we ate spaghetti and drank instant coffee and pretended our teeth weren't aching. The blue tabs shone like strange little flags. She had it witnessed by Miss Cortez from next door and Mr. Baird from the hardware store. She had it notarized. She said, "On the day you become an adult, this house stops being a cage and starts being a key." Her words, not mine. My father laughed. It wasn't a laugh so much as a bark. "You think you can stroll into my kitchen and spit legalese at me?" Your grandmother was losing it. She called the microwave a radio. She also remembered the serial number on every season ticket she ever bought and the names of the men who tried to sell her reverse mortgages. I said, "Don't do this where she can hear." I glanced at the portrait, which watched us with that narrowed gaze that had sliced me in half and stitched me back together in the same afternoon more than once. She knew exactly what she was doing. He touched the folder as if it might be a snake. "You forged this." "I don't know how to forge." I smiled a little, not kindly. "You raised me to be honest, remember? To work. To earn. To never ask anyone for anything I didn't deserve. I didn't ask for this." She gave it. The rain thickened. In the yard, the maple leaves clashed with a sound like distant applause. My mother pulled a chair out without meaning to and sat, knees pressed together, hand cupped against her mouth. "Why would she whispered, eyes swimming. "Why would she do that to us?" She said, I swallowed, feeling how the words wanted to tremble, "that you'd try to kick me out on my 18th birthday." She said you'd call it a lesson. She said you would tell me to be grateful. My father's face, usually a careful arrangement of disdain, went blank. He moved his tongue along the inside of his cheek, considering. Get out. I blinked. Excuse me? Get out. He seized the folder and flung it toward the sink. Paper fanned in the air like startled pigeons and landed against the faucet. You want to play games? Play them outside. Daniel, my mother said sharply, and it shocked us all. She never said his name like that. You can't, what if? He turned to her, voice low. It's a bluff. She can't afford a lawyer. We'll lock the doors. She'll crawl back. I slipped my backpack on. The weight steadied me. I already hired the lawyer, I said. You'll meet her in the morning. He spun back. Who? Thunder grumbled somewhere beyond the maple. I walked to the back door, put my hand on the cold metal latch, and said, her name is Gloria Cortez. And she's expecting your call. The door clicked. The rain lifted its face to greet me. Behind me, my father's voice rose into something fierce and profane. Ahead, the night smelled like wet earth and new metal. I stepped into it, heart beating furiously, and realized I'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. What would they do next? I didn't have a car, only my feet and the umbrella Nana kept by the door, curved handle worn smooth by her palm. The ribs creaked when I opened it, the fabric casting a circle of dry space in the storm. The streetlights smeared gold across the puddles, the maple tossed its branches as if declaring itself an ancient god and all this, merely ritual. Miss Cortez's house sat 2 doors down, a tidy square with crimson shutters and a cracked driveway that forked like a river delta. Her porch light was a quiet star behind rain. When she opened the door at my knock, she was already in her robe, hair wrapped in a scarf patterned with small white doves. She tilted her head the way she did when listening to clients at the legal aid clinic, the gesture half bird, half judge. Well, she asked, stepping aside to let me in. Her hallway smelled like cumin and laundry soap, the floorboards had a friendly give. Somewhere in the living room, her son's old trumpet case leaned against a bookcase like a dog that had learned to sit. He told me to get out, I said. The words felt like a pebble I'd been holding in my mouth. So I told him something he couldn't believe. She took my umbrella, shook it, folded it into compliance. Tea? I nodded, the nod turning into a shiver now that I'd stopped moving. In her kitchen, steam climbed from a kettle like a ghost practicing to be a person. Her fridge door wore a crowd of magnets, gavel, panda, miniature calendar, a photo of me at 12 with braces like storm fences, grinning around a slice of watermelon on her stoop. She poured the water over a sachet that smelled like mint and lemon. You brought the documents? They're on the floor of our kitchen, I said, and she winced. He threw them. We made copies, she said, patient. And digital photographs. And filed the trust with the county. Your father can throw paper around his kitchen all night, it won't change the record. It'll change him, I said. The tea warmed my hands. I thought he'd roar and then laugh and then shake his head and say he was only testing me. But he looked at me like I'd stolen his wallet. Like I was a stranger. Miss Cortez considered that, lips pursed. People confuse love with ownership all the time. Especially when they've sacrificed without asking to. It's ugly math. She tapped the table. But right now we deal with fact. The trust vests today. You are the beneficiary. The house is in the trust. You can permit your parents to reside as tenants. Or you can require them to leave. Given their reaction, I'd suggest you set terms. Rent at a fair rate. A written agreement. Boundaries. The kettle's last breath whistled and faded. Rain played the windows like fingers drumming. I sipped, the mint opening my head. You think he's going to fight? I think he's going to rage, she said. And then, when the rage recedes and leaves him cold and small and counting, he's going to look for ways to regain control. We will make sure his only path forward runs through you. The thought made my stomach flip in a complicated way, triumph threaded with dread. To be a gate meant to be battered. He said I forged it. He will say worse. Her eyes softened. How do you feel? Like I jumped off a roof and haven't hit the ground. I laughed, a rough sound. Is that a feeling? It's a good one, she said. It means you're midair. Midair is where you can still choose how to land. A car passed outside, tires whispering. My phone buzzed on the table with a text from my mother, come back. Your father is sorry. We'll talk. Please don't embarrass us. I showed it to Miss Cortez. She sighed. We'll talk in the morning. 9 sharp. In my office. We'll invite them to join. She paused, the pause full of careful questions she didn't ask. Instead she said, "You can sleep in the guest room." "I'll pay you back," I blurted, and she snorted. "You'll pay for nothing. Consider it my contribution to a better soap opera than the ones on TV." She stood, pressed her palm to my shoulder. "Lock the door. Don't open it if your father shows up in the night." "You think he would?" She looked toward my house as if she could see through the rain and walls to the kitchen, to the scattered papers and the portrait with its hard eyes. "I think men hate losing a story they thought was theirs. And sometimes they do dumb, dangerous things to write a new ending." I lay in the guest room later listening to the rain unspool like tape, thinking of Nana's whisper the day she pressed the envelope in my palm, "When the time comes, don't blink." I kept my eyes open in the dark until the edges of the world softened, until sleep came like a tide, carrying something rough and shining toward shore. What would the morning bring to my door? Morning arrived scrubbed and bright, the storm having dragged all the grit out of the air and left everything rinsed. The maple flashed a clean, eager green, gutters gurgled with the leftovers. Sparrows scolded from the eaves like little old men. Miss Cortez's coffee tasted like sanity. I watched steam abandon my mug and tried not to look out the window toward the house where my toothbrush still waited in the bathroom glass like a question. "Eat," she commanded, sliding a plate of scrambled eggs toward me. "Today is a day for protein and patient fury." I smiled despite the knot in my chest. "Is that a legal term?" "It is now." She poured herself more coffee, then checked her watch. "Your parents?" I checked my phone. No new messages from my mother, 3 from my father, each shorter than the last, the final one just my name. "He'll come," I said, though it sounded like a dare tossed at fate. At 8:47, a shadow crossed the front window. Miss Cortez rose, smoothed her blouse, and motioned for me to stay in the kitchen. "Let me open," she said. I heard the hinges, my father's footsteps, heavy, heel first, their rhythm the same as when he came home after closing the shop, late and sour. He stepped into the kitchen like a storm front, paused when he saw me at the table, and cut me with a glance so sharp it might have drawn blood. My mother came behind him, eyes swollen, sunglasses perched uselessly on her tangled hair. "You," he said to Miss Cortez without greeting. "This is your doing?" "Good morning, Daniel," she said, all silk folded over steel. "Please sit." "Coffee?" "I don't want your coffee," he said, but he sat. My mother sank into the chair across from him, hands folded as if in prayer. "We're here," Miss Cortez continued, "to discuss the terms under which you will continue to live in the house held by the Cortez Family Trust on behalf of Alexandra." "Alex," I said. "On behalf of Alex," she amended smoothly. "We can do this cordially. Or we can file for a formal notice to quit and let a judge set the time frame." "I recommend cordial." My father's lip curled. "You think some papers and a notarized squiggle?" "The deed was transferred 18 months ago," she said, sliding a copy across the table. "Recorded with the county. Here is the stamped copy. The trust vests today. Which means at this moment, any equity decisions, tenancy decisions, repairs, and associated financial obligations fall to the trustee, me, and the beneficiary, Alex." My mother stared at the page as if it were in a language only ghosts read. She touched my wrist. Her touch was soft, fever-warm. "Why didn't you tell us?" "I tried," I said. "I left the envelope on your bed last month. I wrote the note. You threw it away." "I thought it was." "I thought," she swallowed. "Your father said it was just Nana's nonsense." My father drummed his fingers. The sound was the exact tempo of my nerves. "Let's stop pretending," he said, eyes on Miss Cortez. "You want money. How much to make this go away?" I felt something in me go cold. He still didn't see me, he was negotiating with the problem, not the person. Miss Cortez's expression didn't change. "No one is asking for a lump sum. We're proposing a lease. Month to month. Market rate is $1,600, given family status, we'll set it at $1,200. Due the first of the month. One missed payment triggers notice to vacate. Any intimidation, damage to property, or obstruction of trustee duties will be grounds to accelerate." He laughed once, a hard, flat sound. "You think I'm paying my daughter rent to live in my house?" "It's not your house," I said quietly, and his head snapped toward me as if I'd shouted. My voice wanted to shake, I steadied it against the ceramic of the mug. It was Nana's. She chose. She loved me. "So you'll pay. Or you'll go." My mother's hand tightened painfully. "Daniel," she whispered. "We can't, where would we?" He pushed back from the table so fast his chair shrieked. "I'm not agreeing to this circus." He leaned over me, and I smelled his aftershave and the sweet-sour ghost of last night's whiskey. "You think you've won something? You've made yourself an enemy. Of your own father." I held his gaze even as my throat worked. Then stop being that, I said. Be my father. A muscle in his jaw jumped. He looked at Ms. Cortez, at the paper, at my mother, and for a moment the world narrowed to a hinge, the future swinging one way or the other, depending on which words he pulled from the air. He opened his mouth. The front window shattered. It didn't just break, it exploded, a bright cough of glass that sprayed the floor with glittering knives. A rock bounced once on the linoleum and rolled to a stop against the leg of the table. We stared at it as if it might speak. The air rushed in, raw, full of the scent of cut grass and brake dust. Down. Miss Cortez shouted, already moving. She hauled my mother off the chair by the elbow with a strength that didn't match her size. My father flinched back, arm up, as shards pattered around our feet. I felt one nick my cheek, hot, a sting that blossomed into wet. Somewhere outside, a car engine revved. Tires squealed. I crawled to the wall under the counter, heart skittering like something trapped beneath a bowl. My phone lay on the table. I reached too far, my fingers slipping on crumbs, when my father's hand closed over it. He dialed with a too calm efficiency that made my stomach turn. It's handled, he said when he caught me watching, but he wasn't talking to me. He was talking to the story of himself, the one where he took charge and the world obeyed. Miss Cortez was already at the doorway, scanning the street with narrowed eyes. Stay put, she said over her shoulder. To my mother, are you cut? My mother shook her head, then touched her hair as if expecting glass to have woven itself there. Why would, her voice frayed. I swallowed copper. Dad? He looked at me. For the first time since last night, something like uncertainty clouded his gaze. Then the mask snapped back. Probably punk kids, he said. They do this. News said. Miss Cortez turned back, eyes hard in a way I'd never seen. Daniel, who did you call? The police, he said smoothly. Who did you think? Good, she said, but I saw the flick of her attention to the street again, the calculation there. Alex, bathroom. Tap water. Press a towel to that cut. I went, legs shaky, mind buzzing as if I'd stood too near a power transformer. In the mirror above the sink I saw a thin red line on my cheekbone, bright against my skin, like a piece of punctuation I hadn't chosen. I wet a cloth, pressed, watched the bloom of blood leach into white. The house groaned. Somewhere, the radiator ticked like a counting insect. When I came back, my father stood by the window, arms crossed, staring at the gap where outside had been. He looked very small in that moment, boxed by the edges of the wall, the police siren approaching like a steel question. Miss Cortez stood with her phone now, thumb moving, lips compressed. My mother sat back in the chair, shoulders caved inward, eyes distant. Do you have enemies? I asked my father. He didn't look at me. Everyone has enemies, he said. The siren yelled up the street, cut off. Radios crackled. 2 officers stepped in, one older with a belly that pushed against his uniform like bread, the other younger, cheeks flushed with urgency. They took in the glass, the rock, all of us frozen in our assigned poses. You folks all right? The older one asked, voice a practiced blend of concern and boredom. We're fine, Miss Cortez said, stepping forward with the authority of someone who had said those words into many official faces. A rock through the window. The car took off. No plate. You see who threw it? The younger one asked. No, she said. But it wasn't random. The older officer scribbled. You got enemies? My client has recently come into property, she said, and nodded toward me. Her father is unhappy about it. He is, however, present and cooperative. My father bristled. I didn't throw a rock through your window, Gloria. I didn't say you did, she returned. I said unhappiness has a way of dressing itself up in theatrics. The older cop looked between us, assessing the choreography. We'll file the report. You'll want to board this up. Might install cameras. Folks do that these days. As they left, stepping carefully around the glittering field, my father let out a breath that sounded like it hurt. He turned to me. You see what you're bringing on this house? This house is mine. I said before I could stop myself, and the words flared in the room like a sudden match. He flinched as if singed. Miss Cortez's hand landed on my shoulder, steady. We proceed as planned, she said. Document the damage. Daniel, you can stay and help sweep or you can go and cool down. Either way, the lease gets signed this afternoon. My father stared at the hole that had been a window, the curtains stirring like breath. He made a decision, I could see it settling on his face like a mask. He smiled at Miss Cortez, a wide, bright, false thing. Fine, he said. We'll sign your little lease. He walked out, my mother rising, trailing him like a shadow. At the door, he paused, turned his head, and looked at me with eyes that had never learned how to be gentle. But you won't like what comes next, he said. Then he was gone. The house exhaled, and the wind pressed a wet leaf through the opening, plastering it to the floor like a green handprint. What exactly had I invited by telling the truth? The hardware store smelled like sawdust and old men. Mr. Baird stood behind the counter with a roll of duct tape in one hand and a receipt gun in the other, his hearing aid squealing until he smacked it with the back of his knuckle. When he saw me walk in with Ms. Cortez, he lifted his chin, that old bird gesture Nana used to call his eagle look, and said, "Heard you're a landlord now." "Trust beneficiary," Ms. Cortez corrected. "We need plywood, screws, a drill, and a door camera kit." Mr. Baird made a pleased noise, trailing us down the aisle. "Drama on Maple Street," he said to no one in particular. "Better than television." While he rang us up, I drifted toward the rack of locks, little brass teeth glinting. I imagined installing them, imagined the slick click of a bolt sliding home, the way your hand learns the weight of safety. My phone buzzed. A message from an unsaved number. "You think paper protects you? Paper burns." I showed Miss Cortez. Her mouth thinned. "Keep that," she said. "We'll add it to the file." "Do you think it's?" "I think your father has friends," she said. "I think he owes some of them. I think some of them liked the way he owed. The trust changed that. People who were counting on him being in charge are discovering you are in charge. They're going to see if you scare." "I do," I said, surprising myself with the baldness of it. "Good," she said. "Scared people hire lawyers. Reckless people get dead." On the way back, the street glared too bright, edges too crisp. Every pickup looked like a threat. Every man leaning on a porch rail wore my father's smirk. We boarded the window while the house watched us with its new, square eye. Sawdust lifted into the air and glowed like pollen. The drill whined, the screws bit, the plywood made its first complaint and then quieted, accepting its new duty. By the time we were done, my hands vibrated from the tool, and the cut on my cheek had dried to a thin, stiff line. I showered in Ms. Cortez's house, steam filling the little bathroom, and rehearsed nothing in particular, just floated in the aimless, jangly emptiness after a crisis. When I came downstairs, the lease lay on the table like a flattened animal, still and dangerous. "They'll be here at 3, Ms. Cortez said. "I'll have a witness this time. Not that we need one." At 2:57, the doorbell rang. My father came in wearing his good shirt, the blue one he saved for holidays and job interviews, collar too stiff. He smiled like a politician who'd learned how to hide his teeth. My mother followed, eyes down. With them came a third man, tall, slight, with a face like a paper cutout, features neat, arranged with care. He wore a suit that wanted to be expensive and a tie that had achieved it. "Who's this?" Miss Cortez asked, though her tone said she already knew. "Our counsel," my father said, with relish. "Mr. Harrison." Mr. Harrison extended a hand. His palm was dry, temperatureless, like a ceramic tile left in the sun. "A pleasure," he said. "Let's make this efficient." We sat. The air in the room took on that density offices have, invisible and insisting. Mr. Harrison slid a file from his briefcase. "We're challenging the validity of the trust," he began, and Miss Cortez smiled as if someone had told a familiar joke. "Mrs. Larkin, your mother, was not of sound mind." "She was sharper than you are," I said before Miss Cortez could put a hand on my knee to stop me. "She played bridge for money and made the other grandmothers cry." Mr. Harrison's smile never moved. "How charming," he said. "Nonetheless, we will seek an injunction to pause any changes until—" "No," Miss Cortez said, light, almost lazy. "You can file whatever makes your firm feel busy, but the transfer's recorded. We can set a court date. In the meantime, your clients are tenants at will with a written lease, or they are trespassers. Which do you prefer?" For a sliver of a second, so quick I thought I'd imagined it, I saw my father glance at Mr. Harrison as if for permission. The glance burned a small hole in the skin of everything I thought I knew about him. Mr. Harrison made a movement that wasn't a nod and wasn't a shrug, merely the barest allowance. "We'll sign," he said smoothly. "Under protest." "Protest to your heart's content," Miss Cortez said, and slid the pen toward my father. "Initial here, here, and here." The pen made its feather scratch. My father's mouth flattened. My mother's hand shook, the M of her name looked like a bird's legs. I signed last, the A of my name lofting, the X like two crossed sticks. We sat with our thoughts a beat too long. Then Miss Cortez gathered the papers with a brisk little fan. "Copies for you," she said. "And for you. Rent due on the 1st. If it's not in my mailbox by noon, I file that afternoon." My father stood. "You look very proud," he said to me, his voice almost soft. "We'll see how long that lasts." He took my mother's elbow. Mr. Harrison's eyes slid over me like I was a painting he didn't particularly admire. The door closed. The room breathed out. Under protest, I repeated, tasting it. He thinks he's still in the fight. He is, Ms. Cortez said. So are you. The person who threw that rock won't stop at one. She looked at the plywood window, at the bright screws like buttons. Double-check the back door lock. Tonight, don't sleep alone. I've been sleeping alone my whole life, I said, and regretted how true it sounded the moment it left my mouth. She squeezed my hand. Not anymore, she said. Not if you don't want to. I walked home as the sun tilted toward late afternoon, the light going syrup thick. The house lifted its face to me, cautious, as if I were a stranger with a familiar gait. I set my hand on the front door and felt, through the old wood, the steady pulse of something waking up. Was it the house? Or was it me? Inside, the air had that faint stale sweetness old houses exhale after rain. The floorboards under the entry rug kept the shape of our family's feet in their memory. The portrait of Nana watched from the hallway a little less severely, or maybe my heart wanted to believe she approved. In the kitchen, the papers my father had thrown last night still lounged by the sink, curled at the edges where water had licked them. I gathered them carefully, drying each sheet with a dish towel, laying them flat like patient fish. I talked to Nana under my breath the way I had when I was small and afraid of thunder. I did it, I told her. I said the impossible thing. They heard me. And you were right, they didn't believe it. The maple shadowed the window with a grid of leaves. I turned my phone camera on and took a video of the room, narrating quietly, the broken glass gone but a dusting left embedded in the grout, the plywood, the scratch on the table where the rock hit and skittered. For the file, I said. For the record. It made me feel better, this little story I was telling a future judge who might be bored and hungry and, with luck, inclined to fairness. I was halfway down the hall to my room when I heard the back door open. The sound was subtle, the slow tug of a misaligned latch, the whisper-sticky kiss of paint separating from paint. I froze, heart doing that strobe light thing it had learned overnight. The hallway smelled like the umbrella stand, wet wood, a breath of mildew. I put my hand in my pocket, found the small can of pepper spray Ms. Cortez had pressed into it at the hardware store, cool and slick. Mom? I called, too brightly. Is that you? No answer. The house made its house noises, settling pops, the tick of the kitchen clock, in a way that now sounded like a stranger clearing his throat. I stepped backward silently until my heel found the bedroom threshold, then slid into my room and shut the door just short of the latch, leaving a sliver of light. My hands were not shaking, my hands were perfectly still, which scared me more. I grabbed my phone, thumbed a text to Ms. Cortez, back door. Someone inside. Not Mom. The dots appeared immediately, on my way. Don't engage. Police? Wait. I want to see first, I typed, and hated the recklessness of it as I was spelling it. But another part of me, the part that had trained itself to catalog the pattern of my father's rages, to predict when a plate would fly, wanted to know. Information is a kind of weapon. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. The boards learned the stranger's weight wrong, they groaned in a register we'd never taught them. The steps paused outside my door. I pictured the sliver of light, the eye I couldn't see, the breath held on the other side of this thin barrier. My phone buzzed in my hand and I flinched, a mistake, don't move, but the steps continued down the hall toward the living room, then the kitchen. A drawer opened, the second from the left. The one with the rubber bands and stray screws and expired coupons. Rummaging. Metal clink. Paper. I slid to the floor, glued my ear to the wood at the base of the door. The air there was cooler by a degree, whispering up from the crawl space. I could hear him breathing now, not my father, not that dog bark inhale. This breath had a whistle at the end, a narrowness, like a pipe partially blocked. Keys rattled. The back door again. A pause, as if he were listening to the yard, to the neighbor's radio murmuring oldies, to the maple tapping a private code on the siding. Then the careful close. The latch whispered. I counted to 30, then stood, legs shaking belatedly. I opened the door, edged down the hall, and stood in the kitchen where the light had gone from syrup to amber to the color the world becomes when it holds its breath. Nothing looked moved, except the envelope for the lease copies was gone. On the counter, a smudge of ash, so faint I might have imagined it. Outside, a pickup idled 2 houses down. The driver smoked, his face turned away. He could have been anyone. He could have been no one. When he pulled off, he did it with the bored slowness of someone who lives on your street. Miss Cortez burst through the front a minute later, phone in hand, eyes sharp. You okay? He took the lease copies, I said. Or something. He touched the junk drawer. She frowned, went to the drawer, pulled it open, and stared at the gap where Nana's screwdrivers had sat for 20 years. Not junk, she said, almost to herself. Tools. She looked at me. Call the police. Make them write it down. We did. They were less bored this time, more a little irritated, like we were repeating ourselves, like our story had lost its novelty. You really should get cameras, the older one said again. We can't do anything without a face. We're working on it, Ms. Cortez said. In the meantime, we're building a file as thick as your forearm. As they left, twilight washed the room in a mood the color of bruised fruit. I stood at the back door and felt the house pressing into my spine. I'm staying, I said to the empty air. You want me to run? Watch me sit. Then, because I'm not a complete idiot, I packed a bag and went back to Ms. Cortez's for the night. I set the bag by the guest bed, texted my mother, please be careful, and she texted back a single heart, red, bleeding pixel by pixel into the dark. Tomorrow, what would the stranger try next? It wasn't a stranger the next day. It was my Uncle Owen. He arrived at 11 in a truck that coughed blue and parked crooked across the curb so tight two neighbors emerged in unison, all offended eyebrows and crossed arms. Owen hopped out in his denim jacket and the boots he used to climb cell towers back when anyone would hire him to climb anything. He carried his old breezy apology like a flag, hands up, grin bright, letting the offended words slide past him as if they cost him money to hear. Kid, he bellowed when he saw me on the porch. Heard you inherited the kingdom. It's a house, I said. I kept my hands tucked in the sleeves of my hoodie, the day's first coolness had teeth. It's a kingdom if somebody wants it bad enough, he said, winked, and let himself be impressed by the porch swing as if it were Pliny's bust. He climbed the steps with the casual grace of men who have never had to explain themselves to rooms. He smelled like cigarettes, oranges, and something sour under that, like money left in a sweaty pocket. Miss Cortez leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Owen swept her a bow. Don't worry, counselor, he said. I'm not here to break any laws. I'm here to keep your paper queen from getting her head knocked off. I smiled tightly. I don't need a knight. Everybody needs something, he said, eyes flicking over the plywood window. You've got fans, kid. People who care what happens here. He tapped the plywood with his fingernail, listening to the sound. You've also got investors. You mean Dad's friends, I said. I mean people who like to see debts kept tidy. He shrugged. Look. I don't love your father. But I know what he can do when cornered. He's going to get clever, and then he's going to get stupid. There's a window between those two where he's dangerous in a way that isn't obvious. I thought of the ash smudge, the drawer, the missing screwdrivers. He already started. Owen's grin flattened. Figures. He leaned close enough that I could count the sun cracks at the corners of his eyes. Do you trust me? No, I said honestly. Good, he said. Smart. Trust me anyway for 24 hours. If you don't like what I do, you tell me to get off your porch and I'll go. But give me one day to make this house harder to bully. Miss Cortez made a noise of disapproval low in her throat. Owen turned the charm cannon toward her. You can supervise me, he said. Hell, you can draft a contract. Owen Larkin will act as security consultant pro bono for a period of... You climbing towers again, she interrupted, and he blinked, surprised she knew. She grinned. I listen. I know where you fall. He laughed, genuine. Less these days, he admitted. Got a kid. Can't afford to splatter. My heart hiccuped. You have a kid? Layla, he said. 4. Likes bugs, hates pears. You want pictures? He had them, of course, and he offered them the way men like him offered everything, with an open hand that might once have held a knife. Lila in a yellow raincoat crouched over a line of ants. Lila asleep, hair stuck to her cheek. Lila frowning at a pear slice like it had betrayed her. The idea of my uncle loving anything with that softened face unsettled me. It made him human. Why are you helping me? I asked finally. Because Nana once fixed my broken nose and didn't tell your father I cried, he said. Because she told me, in the parking lot of Stay Augustine's, that if I ever wanted to make her proud I'd look out for you. Because I owe her. And because, he tilted his head toward the street where a pickup idled too long at the stop sign, I don't like the looks of the crowd forming. We set to work. Owen installed 2 cameras, one above the front door, one tucked under the eave by the back, while Miss Cortez drafted a sign to make it legal. He walked the perimeter like a dog reacquainting himself with old scent trails. He knelt, palm on the dirt, beside the basement window and wrinkled his nose. They've been here, he said. How do you know? He flicked a bit of something from the sill into his palm. It was a cigarette butt, crushed carefully so it wouldn't fall into the basement. They don't know cameras look down as well as out, he said. New ones always watch the door and forget the places a skinny guy can slide. My phone buzzed. A new message from the number that had texted earlier, paper cameras. Cute. Then a photo, me, taken from the street, my head bent over the grill where Owen was pretending to show me how to light a burner that never worked. The shot had that slightly tilted angle of a phone held too low, the background a smear of our maple and Miss Cortez's red shutters. I showed Owen. His mouth tightened into something that wasn't a smile and wasn't a snarl. Okay, he said softly. Now I'm interested. He took my phone, typed, "Come say hi." Then he handed it back to me and sauntered to the curb with a casualness so theatrical it made the hair on my arms lift. He leaned on the mailbox, whistling the 3 notes people use when they want to sound harmless. The street listened. A minute later, a man I recognized as Mr. Dwyer from the end of the block, owner of 3 lawnmowers and a collection of college football flags, wandered past with his dog, a squat, indignant pug. "Afternoon," he said in the voice of a person who wanted to be left alone but absolutely did not want to be left alone. "Afternoon," Owen said. His eyes slid over the world. He didn't look toward the truck with its windows up, its driver pretending to read. He didn't look at the kid on a bike who had stopped just a hair too far from us. He whistled. The notes curled and came back empty. Later, when the sun had tilted and the maple's shadow had moved to drape itself over the porch like a cat, Owen sat on the steps and folded his long fingers together as if about to pray. "They're going to try tonight," he said conversationally. "That's how men like this think. Daylight is for smiling. Night is for testing. You want me to stay?" I looked at Miss Cortez. She nodded once. I looked at the house, which had settled into itself like an animal curling but not sleeping. I looked at the cut on my cheek in the window glass, fine, precise, a reminder. "Yes," I said. "Stay." Owen leaned back, made himself comfortable, tipped his head to watch the sky pink, then purple. "Good," he said. "I haven't watched a proper storm in a while." "What storm?" I asked, and he grinned without humor, the grin of a man who could smell trouble like ozone. "That one," he said. "And the other kind." Who would step out of the dark when the porch light clicked on? Midnight arrived like a cat, without announcing itself, suddenly present, licking a paw. The heat of the day had slid off the world, the street lay cool and empty except for the occasional slow roll of a car with a driver who wanted to be thought harmless. The cameras hummed to themselves. The porch light buzzed. Owen dozed upright with the practiced posture of a man who'd stayed awake in uglier places. I sat with my knees pulled under my chin, hood up, Nana's umbrella leaned against my thigh like a cane. Miss Cortez had gone home to sleep in a bed not haunted by the sound of our house thinking about itself, but she'd left her presence behind in the shape of a note on the kitchen table. "If anything happens, call 911. Then me. Then record everything." At 12:43, the motion sensor behind the house blinked on. Owen's eyes opened without his body changing position. He put a finger to his lips, then pointed 2 fingers at his eyes and then toward the side yard, the universal sign for see. We moved quiet, sneakers whispering, breath held as if not breathing could make us smaller. The yard smelled like damp dirt and basil from the little planter where my mother grew gilt flowers. I could hear the high grass rubbing its blades together like gossiping crickets. The sensor light held the back steps in a pale circle. Beyond, the dark pressed close in velvet. A shadow peeled itself off the fence. It was a man in a hoodie, the hood up, hands gloved, everything about him careful, almost polite. He stepped into the light and paused, looking at the camera as if inquiring after its health. Then he did something unexpected, he waved. "Okay," Owen breathed, impressed despite himself. The man tried the back door. Found it locked. He knelt, produced a small roll of tools from his pocket, neat, purposeful. He worked the lock with the professional affection of a man repairing a delicate watch. The sound was almost beautiful, the tiny clicks, the sigh of the deadbolt. The door shifted. "Now," Owen said, and stepped forward. "Evening." The man froze, then straightened slowly, hands lifting, palms showing empty as if to remind us we were all neighbors here, all friends. His face under the hood was younger than I expected, eyes pale, mouth quick to smile even now. "Problem?" he asked pleasantly. "Yeah," Owen said. "You're in my niece's yard." "Ah," the man said, nodding as if this solved everything. "I was told the owner was expecting me." "She is," I said from next to Owen. "And she doesn't know you." He laughed, delighted. "That's the fun of it, isn't it?" He took a step back, hands still up, the movement so smooth it took me a beat to realize he was repositioning. "Listen. I'm a contractor." "Your father?" "No," I said. "Hired me to test the security," he finished, rolling right over my denial with the professional confidence of a liar who has made a living skipping from lily pad to lily pad. And, wow, I must say, not bad. If I'd been a real intruder, you'd have had a problem. But because I'm not, Owen moved then, fast enough to startle a bird out of the maple. He took 3 easy steps, closed the distance, and touched the man's wrist with a gentleness that said he knew exactly how to break it and was choosing not to. "What's your name?" he asked, almost affectionate. "Why?" The man's smile grew teeth. "So I can tell your mother what you were doing when the police arrive," Owen said, and the man's eyes flicked, 1 centimeter, toward the gate. Owen saw it. He's scared. "Don't run. They'll think I chased you. I hate paperwork." I called 911. My voice sounded calm, like the voice of someone narrating a documentary about dangerous animals in an ecosystem that didn't technically include them. "Yes," I said. "Attempted break-in. Backyard. Cameras rolling." The man's smile faltered. "You don't want cops," he said lightly. "Cops make things messy. They ask questions nobody wants to answer." Owen shrugged. "Then you shouldn't have come." We stood in a triangle of light, our shadows long and tangled. In the distance, tires hissed. The man sighed, extravagantly, as if we'd forced him to cancel a weekend at the lake. "This is a shame," he said. "I was rooting for you." "From where?" I asked. He grinned again, wide and bright, a banner unfurling. "From the street," he said. "I like the way you sit on your porch. I like your uncle's whistling. Tell Gloria she makes good coffee." The siren rose, close now. The man flicked his eyes at Owen again, measuring. Then he did the most infuriating thing. He sat down on the steps and folded his hands in his lap like a child called to the principal's office. "You want to know something else?" he said conversationally, tilting his face to me. "Paper does burn. But it also cuts. Careful whose finger you nick." The police burst in with their choreography, lights splashing our fence with day. The man raised his hands higher, docile. He told them his name, Evan Shaw, and his story, contractor, misunderstanding, hired by my father, and handed over a business card that smelled like vanilla and lies. They cuffed him, gently, as if he were doing them a favor by complying. As they led him past, he dipped his head toward me. "Happy birthday," he said, and I had to clench my jaw to stop my mouth from answering with something my grandmother would have washed out with soap. When it was over, when the yard sank back into dark and the basil side and my legs turned to damp paper, Owen exhaled a laugh that sounded like a prayer offered to a god he didn't believe in. "Well," he said. "Now we have a name." "And a father who hired a burglar," I said, the words as heavy as the night. "Allegedly," Owen said, but his eyes were hard. "You going to call him?" "Yes," I said, and took out my phone with fingers steadier than they should have been. "Right now." He answered on the 4th ring. "What?" "Evan Shaw says hi," I said. Silence. "Then, don't call this number again tonight." He hung up. The house, the yard, the street, everything, held still, listening, poised, as if the next sound might be the one that decides how the rest of this story goes. What would I do to keep the story mine? The morning news carried a neat, 2-paragraph story about a security consultant detained on suspicion of trespass. They used a stock photo of our street from 3 summers ago when the maple was still skinny and hopeful. The article quoted a family member saying it was all a misunderstanding. The quotes didn't belong to anyone we knew. The comments were the kind where people pretend they understand the past 10 years of your life from a headline. Ms. Cortez was already at the kitchen table when I woke, hair damp, sleeves rolled. "Coffee," she said. Then strategy. Owen had scouted the underside of our house at dawn, returning with dirt on his knees and a snakeskin he presented to me like a trophy. "Harmless," he said. "Just passing through." He meant the snake. I wasn't sure about the metaphor. We called the county clerk to confirm Evan's arraignment time. We called a locksmith who laughed into the phone and promised to bring us a door that would make a Navy SEAL weep. We called Mr. Baird, who promised us a discount on anything we could carry if we promised to tell him all the good parts later. Then my mother called. "Can I come by?" she asked, voice small. "Yes," I said, quicker than my anger wanted me to. "Alone." She came in a sweater I remembered from my childhood, the one with a snag at the waist where I'd tugged at it while we waited in line at the credit union. She looked like someone who had spent the night trying not to move so as not to wake a sleeping beast. "Your father says he didn't hire that man," she said without sitting. "Did you hire him?" I asked. She blinked. "What?" "No." No. "Alex." She stepped closer, then stopped, as if the air between us might bite. "He says you're making trouble. He says you're humiliating us." "I'm protecting myself," I said. "He tried to evict me from a house that isn't his." She wrapped her arms around herself, fingers clutching the sweater as if preparing to tear it. "It's not about the house." "What is it, then?" She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Do you remember the summer after 7th grade?" she asked. "When your father started leaving early? When he came home smelling like outside? I remembered everything. The way he'd stand in the driveway staring at the maple like it owed him news. The thin scar that appeared on his knuckles. Nana moving her pills to a different cabinet, the one above the stove where nobody wanted to reach. Yes, I said carefully. That was when he took the first loan, she said. From a man who said he was a friend. Who called him brother and family. Her voice tilted on that last word. The payments were fine at first. Then Nana got sick. Then the shop had a slow quarter. Then, it was always something. He kept saying he'd fix it. He kept saying he just needed time. How much? I asked. It felt like we were digging, both of us, small spoons into a hill of dirt. The hole yawned bigger with each scoop. She named a number. It sat on the table between us like an animal nobody knew how to feed. Jesus, Owen said softly from the doorway. I hadn't heard him come in, and neither had my mother. She flinched, hand to her chest. She looked at him and flinched again, a different flinch, the old reflex of seeing someone you loved break all their bones and keep smiling. Owen, she said, and not unkindly. He nodded. Mara. You shouldn't be here, she said without heat. You make him nervous. He should be nervous, Owen said. He set a fuse under a kid. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, a layer of varnish had gone, leaving something raw. He didn't want to throw you out, she said to me. He thought if he could make you leave, they wouldn't take the house. They'd see he still had power. Who are they? I asked. She pressed her lips together. They don't give names, she whispered. They call themselves little things that sound friendly. The committee. The network. It's all the same, men in ball caps who smell like mint and sugar and gasoline. Evan? I asked. She shrugged. Maybe. Maybe the one who stands in the shade by the church and smokes. Maybe the one with the fancy tie. Maybe your cousin's friend. Maybe all of them. That's how it works. You can't cut one string because the whole net pulls in. We're not cutting, Ms. Cortez said, voice as gentle as I'd ever heard it. We're documenting. We're building a ladder. My mother laughed, short and helpless. Do ladders scare men with knives? If you climb fast enough, Ms. Cortez said. My mother looked at me then, really looked, the way you look at a house you grew up in after the new owners repainted a color you said you'd never like and then, suddenly, do. I don't want to lose you, she said. You can rent, I said, and hated myself for letting practicality answer before my heart. You can stay if he behaves. You can stay if you sign the rules. You can stay if. He won't, she said, so quiet I almost didn't hear it. He doesn't know how. Silence ran along the floor like water finding its level. Outside, the mail carrier coughed and shoved a catalog through the slot. It landed with a flap that made all of us startle. I used to think, my mother said after a moment, that love was something you earned by keeping the plates spinning. If the plates fell, maybe you didn't deserve it. Maybe that's why Nana loved you so easy. You didn't break her plates. I broke a lot, I said. I dropped a whole stack of her church plates once sneaking cookies. She told me to sweep and keep quiet about it unless I wanted to learn catechism. My mother laughed. It turned into a sob halfway through and she clasped her hands over her mouth as if to keep it from escaping. I stepped forward and put my arms around her, feeling the shape of her under the sweater, the small bones, the places she'd patted herself against impact. She folded into me with a sound that was not something words could hang on. I want you safe, I said into her hair. I want you free, she said into my shoulder. We stood there, Owen and Ms. Cortez politely examining the ceiling, the floor. My mother pulled away first. I have to go, she said. If he knows I'm here she didn't finish. She kissed my cheek near the cut, her lips cool. Be careful. Always, I said. She hesitated at the door, then said without turning, your father thinks he's the only one who knows where the deeds are kept at the clerk's office. She smiled a sliver. He forgot who files the taxes. When she was gone, the house felt briefly hopeful, as if we'd opened a window and let in a breeze that hadn't visited in years. Owen sank into a chair and rubbed his eyes with his palms. Okay, he said. The committee. The network. Cute names. We're not playing their game. What game are we playing? I asked. He looked up, a grin slow and dangerous curling. Ours, he said. We make a list. We get proof. We bring light. He held up his phone. And if that doesn't work, I teach your cameras to sing. Sing what? I asked, and he whistled those 3 notes again, the ones that walked down the block and came back with news. The kind that makes men in ball caps look up, he said. Who would flinch when the song started? We spent the afternoon turning the house into a witness. Owen showed me how to set the cameras to upload to cloud storage with a redundancy loop, how to angle them to catch faces, not hats, how to listen to the sound file and pick out shoes by their squeak. Miss Cortez drafted a letter to the county clerk requesting a copy of every deed transfer and lien associated with our address and my father's business for the past 5 years. She printed it on that thick paper that makes your hands feel important when you hold it. I went door to door with a plate of Miss Cortez's empanadas as cover, asking neighbors casually if they'd seen anyone interesting, anyone helpful, anyone wearing too much cologne and carrying a clipboard. People like to say nobody wants to get involved. In my experience, people are waiting to be asked. Mrs. Liu 2 houses down had noticed a man who wore expensive shoes and always parked 1 block over. Mr. Dwyer had an opinion about the recent decline in lawn manners and also, incidentally, the man who smoked by the church. The guy in the basement apartment across from the park had video of a black SUV idling at odd hours, its brake lights pulsing like a heartbeat. At dusk, as we were laying empanada crumbs on a paper towel and calling it dinner, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Is this Alex? The voice was low and cautious in a way that made me picture the speaker glancing over his shoulder. It depends, I said. Who's asking? A pause. Name doesn't matter. I'm calling because your father thinks you won. You didn't. Not yet. You hurt the wrong people's feelings. My father has a lot of wrong people, I said. You're going to have to be more specific. You're funny, the caller said, no humor in it. Listen. There's a meeting tomorrow. Back room of Sal's Tires. Noon. He's going. He's going to make a promise he can't keep. If you're smart, you'll come too. I put the phone on speaker. Owen and Miss Cortez tilted their heads like dogs hearing a note I couldn't. Why would you tell me this? I asked. Because kids don't know the rules yet. The voice softened a fraction. Because once the promise is made, everyone has to pretend they believe it. And because maybe you kick a chair at the right moment and the promise falls through the floor. The line clicked dead. Owen whistled under his breath. Sal's Tires, he said. That's where Peterson's boy lost 2 fingers to a cheap jack. Is it a trap? I asked. Absolutely, Miss Cortez said. And also an opportunity. I'm going, I said, and both of them opened their mouths to argue. I held up a hand. It's my house. It's my life. I'm not going to sit on the porch waiting for permission slips. Miss Cortez closed her mouth first. Then we go smart, she said. We don't walk in blind. We don't take the bait if they dangle a fight. We bring eyes. Whose? I asked, and she smiled a kind of predatory smile I'd never seen on her before. The county inspector, she said. Sal's has 14 health and safety violations. The back room with the jack doesn't meet code. If men are whispering in a place where the floor itself is illegal, I want a man with a clipboard nearby. Owen laughed, delighted. Gloria, he said, marry me. Absolutely not, she said. But you can carry the clipboard. We planned. We made lists. We paced the kitchen like 3 generals in a war we didn't want but had inherited. When I finally slept, I dreamed of Nana in her church hat, sitting in the back row of Sal's Tires with a fan tapping her palm, judging the proceedings with the same narrowed gaze she used on Meatloaf. I woke with her words in my mouth, don't blink. At 11:45 the next day, the air tasted like hot rubber and fried onions. Sal's lot glittered with broken glass, and the smell of oil lay thick as a blanket over everything. The bay doors were rolled up, a fan turned lazily, doing nothing. Owen's borrowed clipboard made him look official even in his denim jacket. Miss Cortez wore a suit the color of battle. We slipped in through the side, past towers of bald tires and a poster of a woman in a swimsuit whose smile had faded to a ghost. The back room was a cage married to a closet, concrete floor cracked, a jack that should have retired after the first Bush administration crouched in the corner like a tired beetle. My father stood at a table with Mr. Harrison and 2 men in ball caps who smelled like mint and gasoline. His smile was fixed, the set of his shoulders said he was a man holding his breath underwater, counting. Ah, Mr. Harrison said when he saw us. The audience. Public building, Miss Cortez said pleasantly, holding up a piece of paper that might have been a permit and might have been a grocery list. Surprise inspection. One of the men in caps scowled. We're having a private conversation. In a public hazard, Owen said, tapping the crack in the floor with the clipboard. Crack extends more than a 1/4 inch. Trip risk. Right up. He scribbled, and it was astonishing how fast men like this learned to fear ink. My father's gaze slid over me like ice water. You don't need to be here, he said. I need to hear the promise you're about to make, I said. The one you can't keep. He smiled without his eyes. There is no promise. Then we'll just listen to you talk about the weather, Miss Cortez said. I love a forecast. The taller man in the cap chuckled, then stopped when the shorter one didn't. The shorter one had a face like a door someone had kicked too many times. He held up a hand, and the small gesture rearranged the air in the room. New rule, he said. No ladies. Newer rule, Miss Cortez said, stepping forward, no illegal meetings in unsafe spaces. My father put his hands on the table the way people do when they want to look casual and are, in fact, about to flip it. Enough, he said, and his voice was the voice he used on me when I was 7 and had spilled spaghetti on the couch. You win, Alex. Is that what you want to hear? You win. I'll tell you what I want, I said, and my voice didn't shake. I want you to pay your rent on time. I want you to stop calling men who don't say their names. I want you to come home and apologize to Mom. I want you to get help. Silence. The fan turned. The jack stared. Mr. Harrison looked at the ceiling, avoiding being a person in this scene. The short man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Sweet, he said. You taught her to dream. My father's mouth opened, closed. The hinge squeaked. He looked at me with something I hadn't seen before in his gaze, a sliver of awe, like he'd come upon a cliff he hadn't realized was there and was suddenly, grudgingly, impressed by the drop. Then Owen's eyes flicked to the ceiling, and his expression changed. He mouthed a word I didn't understand at first. Then I did. Camera. Who had put it there, and what did it want to see us do next? Owen's mouth framed the word again, camera, and this time I saw it, a black button hiding in the shadow where conduit met beam, a cyclops the size of a quarter, its glass eye reflecting the lazy fan. Mr. Harrison's gaze snagged on my discovery for a fraction too long, and that was all the permission the short man needed to smile like a trap closing. Insurance, he said. We all like a record. Miss Cortez slid the inspector's clipboard from Owen's hand, the gesture so smooth it looked choreographed. Wonderful, she said brightly, backing toward the door and lifting the board like a shield. Because I brought one too. Mr. Lang? She raised her voice, and the air changed, footsteps came from the bay like the sound a jury makes when it stands. A man in a county windbreaker stepped in, little seal on his chest catching the fanlight. Afternoon, he said, voice bored in the way of professionals who delight in rules. He clocked the jagged crack in the concrete, the jack's bent foot, the crooked electrical box, and his face bloomed with the polite joy of a man seeing violations multiply like fish. Looks like a party. Who's responsible for this space? Sal himself materialized behind him like a man stepping out of a magic trick, rag in hand. His eyes pinballed from cap, to my father, to Miss Cortez, to the county seal. We're closed, he said, too late. Great, Mr. Lang said, cheerfully indifferent. Easier to write. The short man shifted, recalculating, he didn't like a room that suddenly recognized itself as public. Wrap it up, he murmured to my father, not bothering to hide his mouth. Say yes and we're done. Mr. Harrison pasted on his courtroom smile. My client is willing to satisfy his obligations, he said smoothly. Upon receipt of? No, Miss Cortez said, and the soft word landed like a small hammer. She pointed at the camera above their heads, her voice clear and clipped for the record. This room is not a legal venue to contract, this floor is an immediate hazard, and any agreement obtained under threat of property interference or bodily harm is void and likely criminal. Mr. Lang, do you mind turning on your body cam? He hadn't turned it off, later he'd show me the little red dot had been glowing since he shrugged into the windbreaker, but he obligingly tapped it. Rolling. The short man laughed, and for the first time his eyes warmed, a kind of admiration. You're good, he said to Miss Cortez. And you? He turned to me with that empty smile, the one men wear when they think they're inventing a lesson. You're brave. But brave kids get tired. Brave kids hire adults who aren't tired, I said, and I felt Nana in every syllable, the way she used to make the syllables stand straight like soldiers. You want to talk about obligations? Let's talk about the broken window, the trespass, the contractor who waved at my camera. Let's talk about the man who texts from blocked numbers. Let's talk about the trust that recorded 18 months ago under your noses while you were out here smelling like gasoline. Paper cuts, he said softly, and smiled. That's the thing about paper, Miss Cortez said, still bright, still deadly. It stacks. Mr. Harrison lifted a hand, palm out, as if to charm the scene into quiet. Officers aren't necessary, he began, and that was when Owen, of all people, provided the match. He scraped the clipboard's metal clip along the ceiling beam, sparks flaring harmlessly against old paint, then popped the tiny camera loose with 2 fingers. Oops, he said, and dropped it to the floor, where it stared up at us, pupil blank. Unsafe ceiling attachment, he added to Mr. Lang in a tone of professional regret. The short man moved without thinking, the movement of someone who hates losing the only eye he trusts. He lunged a half-step forward, and that half-step was all it took for the room to reorder around him. Owen's posture changed into something tensile. Ms. Cortez slid her foot so if he took one more step he'd trip himself. Mr. Lang's pen made a quick note that would later become an entire paragraph, and my father finally spoke as if he were not underwater. "Stop," he said, voice grated raw. He didn't look at the short man or Mr. Harrison. He looked at me, like a man who had found a window underwater and, shocked, seen daylight. "I'm not signing anything." The short man's head turned an inch, the way a dog tilts when a sound displeases it. "Daniel," he said, gentle and not. "Let's not let our tempers." "It's not tempers," my father said, and his hands lifted from the table as if they were suddenly heavy with the idea of themselves. "It's my daughter." And there it was, unexpected and too late and still, somehow, the words I had wanted since the day he taught me to ride a bike by pushing and letting go too soon. It didn't absolve him. It didn't erase the rock, the text, the hired smile at my back door. But it entered the record, and the record mattered. The short man's smile didn't move but his eyes went flat. "Ah," he said softly. "The oldest story. The family hero." "No," Ms. Cortez said. "Just a witness." She tapped the body cam dot with one fingertip. "On 3, I'm calling the non-emergency line to report an unlicensed surveillance device in a commercial space and a hazardous condition in an occupied area. You're welcome to stay and discuss lease terms, gentlemen. Or you can leave and meet with my office at the courthouse like civilized people do." The fan turned, the daylight shifted an inch on the oil-stained wall. Mr. Harrison judged the wind and folded, the way men like him fold when a fine isn't a fee they get to bill to someone else. "We'll reschedule," he murmured to the short man, who kept smiling as if the muscles had been welded in place. "To the courthouse, then," the short man said. "We love the courthouse." He looked back at me, and finally, I saw it, not anger, calculation. "Tell Evan I said hi." "You can tell him yourself," I said. At arraignment. We left in a staggered line. Outside, the heat hit like a hand. My father stopped on the cracked asphalt and I stopped too, out of some old habit neither of us could shed in an instant. "You made a mess," he said without heat. "You also kept us from drowning." "I can hold two ideas at once," I said. "Can you?" He exhaled a laugh that had no mirth to wrap itself around. "Gloria will say I should sign your lease and keep my head down. Gloria will say you should pay what you owe to the people who don't throw rocks," Ms. Cortez said, coming up behind us with Mr. Lang, who was already on the phone with someone whose job title had the word compliance in it. "And you should consider calling someone who speaks the language of recovery." He looked at Owen, at me, at the sun hammering the lot flat. "You'll give me a chance," he asked, not a plea, not a demand, a fact he didn't know the answer to yet. "I'll give you a lease," I said. "The rest is your work." His eyes flicked, for once, to the place where I stood, not to the story hovering around me. He nodded once and walked toward his car like a man with two weights in his hands, deciding which to carry first. We watched him go until the heat turned his outline wavy. The short man's truck idled across the street, a beats too slow heart. He raised 2 fingers from the wheel as if saluting the weather. Ms. Cortez tucked the broken camera into her bag like a souvenir. "Now what?" I asked. "Now we go home," Owen said, whistling those 3 notes again, and this time when they walked down the block they came back with something small and bright, the sound of a neighbor clapping once, sharply, like a starter pistol. Who had they been cheering for? After that, everything didn't get easier. It got precise. Mr. Lang's report triggered a fine. Sal's closed the back room. The jack went to the scrap bin with a final, affronted squeal. Evan pled out to trespass, a slap that stung and put a mark where we needed it. The text thread, "Paper burns," entered a file with a cheerful blue tab and a case number that looked like a lottery ticket. Mr. Harrison filed a challenge that sounded like theater and read like stalling. The short man stopped smiling when he saw me, he didn't wave. He learned my camera's blind spots, I moved the cameras. The first of the month came hot and hard. The maple's leaves hung with dust, the air tasted like copper pennies and grilled corn from the block party Mr. Dwyer insisted on holding despite everything. At 11:17 a.m., an envelope slid into Ms. Cortez's mailbox. Inside, a cashier's check for $1,200, made out to the trust, signature slashed like a cut. I held it by the edges like it might bite. "Deposit it," Ms. Cortez said gently. "Let the bank do the emotional labor." I did, watching the numbers reorder on the screen with the same guilty hope I felt the first time I realized money changed behavior. That afternoon, my father stood on the porch and handed me a single key. He didn't step over the threshold. He looked older than he had at Sal's, the way men look when they sleep on couches and make the decision to check their hands for shaking before they pick up a coffee cup. "I'm moving out," he said without preamble. "Your mother's staying with you for a while. If you'll have her." I will, I said, and meant it so deep it hurt. Where will you go? Your uncle knows a man, he said, which in our world meant someone with a spare room and a houseplant that hadn't died despite neglect. I'm going to a meeting. He raised his eyes at me like a man showing his empty palms. An actual one. Not at a tire shop. I didn't move toward him. Nana would have. Nana would have wrapped him up and told him he was a good boy for telling the truth. I stood and held the doorframe with one hand, feeling the grain of the wood and the groove where 3 generations had worried it into an old riverbed. I want you to get better, I said. I want you to stop looking like Nana when you tell me what to do, he said, and then he surprised us both. He smiled, small and true. It's very unnerving. He went down the steps like a man learning the stairs' names. In the kitchen, my mother set 2 plates as if we were having company. She looked up when I came in, eyes puffy and fierce, hair pulled back in the way she wore it when she meant to survive. Is he gone? She asked. For now, I said. She nodded, then blinked fast and pressed her mouth together. I bought basil, she said, ridiculous and perfect. The old plant was stressed. Me too, I said, and we laughed the laugh you laugh when the house you live in hasn't collapsed yet, and that miracle, for the moment, is enough. Owen came by that night with Lila in tow, her raincoat yellow even though the sky was clear because she liked it that way. She marched into the yard and knelt with the solemnity of a priest, examining the basil's new leaves for aphids. No bugs, she reported, pleased. She tugged my sleeve. Do you like pears? Not especially, I said. Good, she said gravely. We're going to be friends. We strung warm bulbs across the porch, the cheap kind that make plastic smell like summer. Neighbors drifted over with folding chairs, some because of the block party, some because we'd become those people. The story you crane your neck to hear when the parade passes. We ate empanadas and deviled eggs and a cake Mrs. Lou claimed was store-bought and absolutely wasn't. Mr. Baird brought a fan that sounded like a blender. He set it in the doorway and declared it circulation. The house breathed. Later, after people had gone home with paper plates wrapped in foil and the porch had softened into that late hour when stories told themselves, my mother found the envelope Nana had tucked into the false bottom of the umbrella stand. We pried it open with a butter knife. Inside, a letter written in that old slanting cursive schools stopped teaching, the loops of her L's big enough to climb through. If you're reading this, it began, then I guessed right about a few things. I don't like being right about the hard parts, but here we are. A house is not a prize, it's a responsibility. It should shelter people. It should not be a stage for a man's fear of himself. If he chooses to learn, let him. If he chooses to go, let him. If you choose to stay, make sure the roof doesn't leak and the table is big enough for the people you invite. She had drawn, at the bottom, a little map of the basement and a mark where the good hammer hid. She had written, in tiny letters, don't blink. I didn't. In the weeks that followed, the short man faded the way people do when they discover the line they thought they owned has shifted elsewhere. Mr. Harrison sent filings in long envelopes that sounded expensive when you shook them and didn't matter much when you read them. Evan avoided our street. When I saw him at the grocery store he lifted a hand in a piece that might have been apology or might have been convenience. The cameras kept humming, little red dots that blinked like fireflies that had sworn an oath. Rent arrived again, then again. Sometimes on time, sometimes with a late fee. My father's text messages shed their knives and became bones, short, clean, capable of holding weight. Meeting went okay. Can I fix the porch step Saturday? Tell your mother I found her blue sweater. I answered when I could. I didn't when I couldn't. He learned the shape of that boundary, the way we were teaching the house to learn our shapes all over again. On a Sunday in late September, the maple turned, 1 leaf then 1,000, a slow burn. The air smelled like pencils and apples and the rubber of new soles. I sat on the porch swing with my feet tucked up, the umbrella Nana had held leaning in the corner, the basil lush is a small forest. Miss Cortez stopped by with a bag of lemons and news I already knew. Woo, case moving, papers good, the slow wheels moving in our favor. Owen whistled from the curb and Lila answered him with a nonsense song that made the short man across town look up without knowing why. Night came the way it always had, without permission, without malice. I flipped the switch and the porch bulbs caught, a little galaxy. The camera's dots blinked their lullaby. Inside, the house settled the way an animal does when it knows the den is safe, planks breathing, pipes clicking, walls holding in their old creaks like secrets they were willing to keep. I could hear my mother in the kitchen humming an old hymn, the good hammer knocking once under the sink for reasons only a house and a mother understand. I thought of the first night, of rain and paper plates and a wish trapped in cooling wax. I thought of a rock through glass, of a glove at my back door, of a man who waved at a camera and told me to be careful with paper. I thought of my father's eyes at Sal's tires and how awe isn't love but sometimes points toward it. I thought of Nana's looped letters and her map with the X where the tool you need is always smaller than you think and always enough if you know where to look. A car rolled by slow and harmless. The porch swing creaked. Somewhere down the block a dog barked at a thing only dogs and old houses hear. I put my hand on the doorframe and felt our home's pulse, steady, stubborn, finally ours. When the porch light clicked on that night, it wasn't because someone was testing our fear. It was because I turned it on. And when the shadow at the end of the walk hesitated, then stepped into the circle, hat in hand, jaw tight, eyes clearer than I'd seen them, I didn't blink. He stopped at the bottom step, hat twisting in his hands like a worry stone. Up close he looked like morning after a storm, branches everywhere, sky scrubbed raw, something fragile and new under the mess. He lifted his chin as if looking the doorframe in the eye. "I owe you a pane of glass," he said. "You owe us more than that," I said, and shifted so he could see Miss Cortez in the doorway behind me and Owen leaning in the porch shadow like a crooked lamppost. "But you can start there." He climbed the steps, slow, as if each plank might quiz him. He didn't cross the threshold. "I got a letter from the court," he said. He held it out and the paper trembled just enough to make me want to steady it and not steady him. "Hearings on Tuesday. Harrison says he can stretch it out for months." I don't want that." "Good," Ms. Cortez said, coming forward, voice like velvet folded over a book of rules. "Because we won't let him. The trust holds. The only question left is whether you stand next to it or try another rock." He looked past us into the house as if expecting to see his ghost in the hallway, feet up on the coffee table, remote in hand. What he saw was my mother at the sink, sleeves up, basil leaves on a towel like little green boats. She wiped her hands and came to the door, stopping just short of touching him. Her mouth quivered into a shape that might have been a smile or a warning. "You're late," she said. "For which thing?" he asked, and she blew out a laugh through her nose in spite of herself. He took a breath that sounded like it scraped something on the way out. "I want to tell the judge the truth," he said. "I want to tell him about the loans and the committee and the night and that I hired Evan. I want to say I was wrong and I'm paying. I want to ask for time to be better." "You want to testify against your own mess," Owen said, admiring. Finally, a spectator who bought a seat. My father swallowed. "They'll come for me if I talk." "They already came," I said, touching the faint line on my cheek. "You're late to your own story." He nodded, once, twice, like a man accepting a sentence he'd whispered about in empty rooms. "All right," he said. "Tuesday." He shifted his hat to his other hand, found the brim, found his balance. "I brought this, too." He held up a small black notebook, edges furred from pockets and worry. Names, dates. How much I paid. How much I didn't. Where. I didn't write everything, I thought if I wrote it down it'd become real. But there's enough. Miss Cortez took it as if he'd handed her a hummingbird. Her eyes flicked, the quick nod she gave afterward had heat in it. "This will help," she said. "It doesn't make you a hero. It makes you useful." "I'll take useful," he said. He finally risked the doorframe, resting his palm there, feeling the groove where 3 generations had leaned. "I'm going to a meeting," he added, glancing at me as if to see whether the word would shatter in my hearing. "Every day." "I'm going to the hardware store," I said. "Tomorrow. To order glass." He smiled, real this time, a flash as brief and astonished as a fish breaking water. "Save the receipt. I owe you." The courthouse hallway smelled like floor wax and old paper. Our footsteps made that amplified tap-tap that convinces you every thought you've ever had can be heard by bored men leaning on beige walls. The judge wore the face of a man allergic to drama. Mr. Lang sat in the back with his windbreaker like a flag. Sal didn't show, fines do that to a man. Harrison glided like oil on a pond. The short man sat 2 rows behind us in a tie stiff enough to be a brace, the smile gone because it was rude to smile in church. My father took the stand and did not perform. He told the story like someone reading out inventory, once cherished, now listed, no adjectives. Loans. Missed payments. The moment he stood in our kitchen and decided he'd rather be cruel than ashamed. The rock he didn't throw but watched get thrown. The phone calls longer than the nights. Evan and the back door. Sal's tires and the camera and the promise he almost made. "And your daughter?" Harrison asked tightly, trying to reach for a rhetorical rope he could pull the whole case along. My father looked at me. It wasn't a look you win with, it wasn't a look to break a person. It was a look that took the exact size of me and said, "I see it now." "She told me something I didn't believe," he said. "So I made it true for a minute. I won't be doing that again." Judge Kim flipped through our stack, trust papers with blue tabs, the county recording stamped, Mr. Lang's report with photos of a jack that deserved a funeral, the police report with Evan's cheerful wave, the clip of the camera eye falling from the beam in Sal's, the texts that began with paper burns and ended with an arraignment ticket. The judge's pencil tapped her pad exactly 3 times. The trust is valid, she said, as if commenting on the weather. The court denies the challenge. Tenancy acknowledged per signed lease. Payment schedule stands. The court strongly suggests. And here she peered over the glasses in the way Nana had once peered at me when I'd used 3 eggs instead of 2, counseling, for everyone. And Mr. Larkin, she meant my father, if you are threatened or contacted by any party regarding these debts outside of lawful channels, you will reach out to Ms. Cortez and to law enforcement. This is not a movie. We do not do shadow. We do paperwork. Her gavel cracked like a good joke. Next. Outside, the air had that brittle sunshine of an afternoon that has decided to behave. The short man stood under a no-smoking sign and didn't smoke. He held his phone in both hands like a prayer and looked up when we passed. Paper stacks, he said, a little wonder leaking into the words. Careful, Ms. Cortez said, brushing past, you might catch a paper cut. He laughed, a small thing without teeth, and didn't follow. We got falafel from the truck half a block down. Owen salted his like a sinner. My mother spread napkins as if the wind were a toddler you had to distract with hospitality. My father drank water like he'd just invented it. We sat on the courthouse steps under a sky so blue it felt like a dare and ate until the grease bags went translucent. Cars went by. People with their own storms passed without looking. When we finished, my father held his cup up, studying the ripple left by his last sip, and said, if I ask, will you let me fix that porch step? I already said yes, I answered, which wasn't forgiveness but was fact. And it's 2 steps. He nodded, once. He didn't ask for more. That evening we took the plywood down. The glass came in the next morning, delivered by a boy who could have been me a year ago, thin, fierce, aching to prove his arms knew how to carry weight. Mr. Baird showed up even though nobody had called him, because men like him have a sense the way cats have one for boxes. He laid out the glazing points and tapped each one with a reverence usually reserved for communion. Owen held the pane with my father. I pressed the putty into the frame with the flat of a butter knife the way Nana had taught me to smooth frosting when all we had was margarine and patience. My mother stood back with the basil and declared the angle handsome, which made us all work more carefully. When the new glass slipped into place, the house exhaled. A finch hit the window a minute later and bounced, startled, and flew off, alive. My father's breath broke at the same time and didn't hurt. We cleaned up the last glittering crumbs of the rock from the grout with a toothbrush we didn't need anymore. We tuned the camera just off-center so it could see anyone who waved. That night, before the block grew quiet enough to hear your own bones, the doorbell rang once, a short, polite ding. A beige envelope sat on the mat. Inside, a receipt stamped paid for a tow on a car we didn't know, and a note in block handwriting, we don't do shadow. Understood. No signature. The paper smelled faintly of mint. I slid it in the file with the rest. Paper stacks. On the porch, under the cheap bulbs, we ate basil on tomatoes and listened to Lila sing a song she'd invented that had no chorus and 3 bridges. The maple shifted its shoulders. Mr. Dwyer yelled at his pug to stop insulting the moon. Ms. Liu handed us a slice of cake across the rail with a conspirator's wink. In the kitchen, the good hammer thumped once to tell us it existed. The house settled. The cameras blinked. The glass held. What now? Owen asked, tipping his chair onto 2 legs, whistling nothing in particular. I looked at the doorframe, at the groove my palm had made, at the new pane shining like a clear idea. I thought of Nana, of her map with the X at the hammer, of her letter about roofs and tables. I thought of the judge's pencil taps. I thought of my father standing on the courthouse steps holding water like a truce. Now we live in it, I said. Like a kingdom? Lila asked around a mouthful of cake. Like a house, I said, and turned the porch light on because it was getting dark and the people we loved were still making their way up the walk. We didn't fix everything. We fixed things as they broke. The porch step went first, the one that had learned our weight too well and had a deep sigh trapped in the wood. My father replaced it without cursing once, which felt like a small miracle, then stood back with his hands on his hips and didn't ask for praise. We gave it anyway, in the form of lemonade and a silence that let him keep some dignity intact. He went to meetings in a church basement that smelled like folding chairs and coffee that had boiled too long and came back with phrases underlined in his mouth, one day at a time, make amends when you can, don't pick up the first one. He didn't move back in. He learned to knock. Evan sent a postcard from a job out of town, a mountain drawn on the back in ballpoint with an apology so small you needed to tilt it to the light to read. We didn't write back. The short man vanished the way dusk does when you flick on a light. Mr. Harrison filed one more thing and then another and lost both. Rumor had it he changed firms. Sal's got a new jack. Miss Cortez took us to the clerk's office one bright morning and had me sign 3 more documents with that smooth little flourish she said I'd earned. She taught me the language of gutters and escrow and why you keep a hard copy of everything even when the cloud hums along like a benevolent god. She sat with my mother at the kitchen table late into evenings talking about wills and what women do with houses when they are no longer pretending a house is a man. We made rituals. Sunday morning we opened the windows no matter the weather and let the house stretch and the neighbors think we were eccentric. Tuesday night my mother made soup and anyone could bring a chair and themselves and that was plenty. Sometimes Owen read Lila a story in a voice that made even the tea kettle listen. On the first of the month, at 11:59 a.m., I walked to Ms. Cortez's mailbox and waited. Sometimes the envelope arrived early. Sometimes it didn't and I learned to keep my heart from sprinting welcome circles. When it was late, we acted accordingly. Paper stacks. We didn't blink. The house learned us. The cameras settled into a trickle of quiet hours punctured by the occasional stray cat and the parade of people we loved. The basil seeded and we saved the seeds in an old baby food jar with a label my mother wrote in the grandma cursive Nana had handed down to us the way some families hand down blue eyes. The maple did that thing maples do in wind, leaf back silver flashing, then green, and it always looked like applause to me. Maybe for us. Maybe for itself. One afternoon in late October the light went copper for no reason. My father came by with a pane of stained glass the size of a book, a pattern of a bluebird trapped in amber he said he'd found at a salvage shop. He held it up to the window he owed me and asked, "Can I," like a person asking to take a photograph of a stranger's dog. We set it in the upper corner with putty and patience, and when the sun hit it, the bird threw a patch of ocean onto the floor. Layla lay down in it and declared herself illuminated. We let her be. That night, after everyone left and the dishes sulked neatly in the sink and the porch bulbs had their halo thing going, I found the last candle from my 18th birthday in the junk drawer, the drawer now full of precisely labeled not junk. The wick was bent where it had drowned in melted wax. I set it in the saucer Nana used to keep her rings and lit it. The light puddled, small and steady. I pressed my thumb into the old wax scar and felt the shape of my first wish sitting there like a coin in a fountain. You know, my mother said, coming up behind me so quietly she could have been the house, "I never told you what Nana said to me when I was about to marry your father." What? She said, "If you have to choose between being right and being kind, be clear." My mother smiled into the candlelight. I didn't understand it then. I do now. You were clear. I was scared, I said. Those aren't opposites, she said. She touched the scar on my cheek with her pinky, the way she used to touch my thermometer when I was small, measuring. You kept the light on. We stood there regarding the bluebird and the basil and the doorframe groove and the new glass and the candle and the shadow our bodies made on the floor, all layered and ordinary as a life. The house gave a content little pop, as if a joint had clicked back where it belonged. Later, when Owen walked Lila home and Ms. Cortez texted me a photo of a lemon too perfect to be real and Mr. Baird turned off his fan with the reverence of a man ending a season, I went out to the porch and sat in the swing. The night was cool and busy with cricket industry. Across the street, Mr. Dwyer's pug was negotiating with a fallen leaf, both of them convinced of their importance. A figure came down the sidewalk, hands in jacket pockets, pace easy, no hat. My father nodded at me as he passed, the smallest sign. I nodded back, an exchange neither of us would ever register with words and all the better for it. He kept walking toward the church basement and its bad coffee and fluorescent absolution. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. He had to learn a new kind of doorframe to lean on. "Hey, Nana," I said to the darkness, because sometimes you talk to the places people leave behind and it helps. "We're okay." The porch light hummed. The cameras blinked. The bluebird threw its ocean on the floor and the basil smelled like the inside of a summer. The house had learned to keep us. We had learned to keep it. Some nights I still dream of rocks and glass and men with hats and strings, but when I wake I walk my hand along the groove in the frame and step into a kitchen where the letters are filed, the hammer is exactly where the map says it is, and the table is big enough. If there's a knock at midnight, we answer with a light and a locked door and a stack of paper and people who will stand behind us while we read our names out loud. And if anyone asks me now what I told my parents that they couldn't believe, I say it again, calm as a ledger, bright as a pane, the house isn't yours. It's mine. Then I hand them a plate, because the soup is ready, and there's room.